الله الرحمن الرحيم وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة صدق الله العظيم. Following on from the two sessions which we have had on Saturday and Sunday, today's session is more of a wrap-up, okay, where inshallah we will cover a few scenarios, frequently asked questions, and then inshallah Mufti Javed will take over. He will cover the masail and rulings on pensions and also take questions from the floor. So whatever questions you have, he will inshallah answer them. So starting with one question or one misconception that people generally have is, if you remember yesterday, we talked about a person's Zakah anniversary. Okay? So that is the date when a person every year will calculate his or her zakat. Yeah? So we discussed that in quite a bit of detail. Now some people, they have this misunderstanding that for each type of asset that you have, there is a different zakat anniversary. Okay? Especially amongst the women folk, they have this understanding that cash is calculated on a separate day and they will have a day for that. This is how much cash I have, this is how much zakat I have to give on the cash. And then for gold and silver, they will have another date. Okay? And they will calculate the amount of gold they've got and calculate the zakat for the gold on that day, which would be a separate day to the date for the cash. This is incorrect. A person only has one zakah anniversary date, i.e. only one date in which that person will calculate his or her zakat. Okay? So like I mentioned yesterday and we covered it in detail, if somebody knows their date when they first became sahibun nisab, then fabiha, excellent. If not, you will pick a date and then you will use that date every year. So it will be that date when you will calculate all your cash and all of your gold and silver, whatever zakatable assets you have, you will calculate on that one day. You don't have different days and dates in the year for different zakatable assets. I hope that is quite clear. The other question which I generally get asked, okay, is this. And I will explain it in this manner. The zakat you pay is dependent on your financial situation on your zakah anniversary date. So whatever your zakah anniversary date is, whatever cash you've got, whatever gold and silver you've got, whatever business assets you've got, you will total them up. Okay? And then you will have your debts, whatever you owe according to what we've discussed yesterday, and then you will minus your debts from your zakatable assets. Okay? It's what you've got on the day that matters. Yeah? So on my zakat anniversary date, for example, 1st of Sha'ban, my zakat anniversary date, I sit down with my cash and I've got total cash of £3,000, yeah, and I've got gold and silver worth £5,000, then that's a total of £8,000. It's what I've got on the day. A lot of people, what they seem to think is, when you work out your zakat, you're supposed to total up whatever you've earned during the year. So they'll have questions like, Masab, I have earned this year £15,000 in rental income. Do I have to calculate that in my zakat? So obviously what they think is that that's how much they've earned, so that's how much they've got to calculate, even though that £15,000 of rental income might have already been spent. Does that make sense? So it's not what you've earned during the year, it's what you've got on the day that matters. So this person might have accrued £15,000 in rental income, yeah? However, he spent all of that £15,000 before his zakah anniversary date came. So when he works out his zakah, he's not going to count that £15,000 because he's not got it anymore. It's what you've got on the day. And believe me, I get asked this question so many times, so I thought, let me just clarify that. One last question before I hand over to Mufti Javed Sahab. Can zakah be given to a person in debt? This is another question which is generally... Are you going to cover this? Okay. Can a person be given zakah who is in debt? Okay, so you know a person, his debts outweigh his assets. And that person Islamically is poor in the sense that he is not sahibun nisab. After taking out his essential needs, he doesn't meet the nisab threshold. Yeah, and he's got a lot of debt. Are you allowed to give such a person your zakat? This is a common question that is asked. Okay, now the answer to this is, it depends. Yeah. Before you make a decision on whether or not you're going to give this person who is in debt your zakat, you can't just look at his situation from this angle, or he's got a lot of debts. His debts are more than his assets, so yes, you can give him zakat. It's not as straightforward as that. You also have to look at his overall lifestyle. Okay? And you've also got to look at all the other luxuries that he has in his life. Let me give you an example. Let's say you've got a person who's got zakatable assets worth £10,000, but his debts are £100,000. So he's minus 90,000. Okay? However, he's mashallah a businessman. Yeah? He's got 3 cars parked on his driveway. He's got mashallah 2 houses. Yeah? Every day mashallah he's got nice clothes on. Yeah? So from his lifestyle you can tell, yeah, this person is living a very comfortable life, and all his extra items are mashallah far exceeding any debt etc. that he's got. Then that sort of person you will not be allowed to give that sort of person your zakat. Okay? And I'll give you an example. I mean, a lot of times, unfortunately, you'll have a businessman, yeah, and businessmen who shouldn't do, but if they deal with interest, then a lot of times it will be the case that their debts will far exceed their assets, because they're always borrowing to start a new business venture or buy this property or that property. Now, if you were to have this rule that any person in debt is allowed to receive zakah, yeah, then can you imagine the problems that you would have and the abuse that you would have? Rich people would end up receiving zakat. Okay, so that's why it's very important to appreciate this mas'ala, that when you're answering this question, can you give zakat to a person who is in debt, you can't just look at the debt, assets and debt. You've got to look at the overall lifestyle of this individual, the overall circumstances of this individual, overall extra items, luxuries, etc., and then take a decision accordingly. And if you're unsure, you can always consult a local scholar, Mufti Javed Sahab, etc. So I hope that clarifies that question as well. I will now pass on to Mufti Javed, who inshallah cover the pension element and also answer any questions that you may have. Jazakumullah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. Amma ba'd. Well, Habibullah puts me in a very difficult situation and raising your expectations. I am happy to receive your question. Whether you receive an answer in return or not, that will depend. Certain points I just wanted to very quickly just cover based on the presentation that has taken place over the 2 days and the following discussions individuals have had with me. First one about zakat and the person on who the zakat will become farz. One of those conditions was sanity. a person needs to be saved. One of the questions that came was, I take care of my sister who doesn't fall under the category of saying, so I'm the custodian of her wealth. So do I pay zakat on her wealth? So the clarity on that matter is, because zakat is not first on her, although you are the custodian of that wealth, you won't take zakat out from her wealth. One question again in the presentation was about, you can't give zakat to a non-Muslim. Similarly, any kind of, the rule over here, somebody asked about sadaqatul fitr. The rule is, any wajib sadaqah, any wajib, when we say wajib in Arabic terminology, that includes farz and wajib. Any wajib sadaqah cannot be given to non-Muslim. All wajib sadaqah needs to be given to a Muslim, poor and needy, and the non-Muslim can be given a nafil sadaqah or lillah that we say. One question was on tamliq, and Maulana referred to making the person who you give zakat to the owner of that wealth. And many charities on their leaflets, and this was one of the ball of contention, was, can you give zakat to a charity that builds well or water provision in a poor and needy area? So they take your zakat and they build a well in a village where most people are in need of water, and they themselves are poor and needy. Would that be okay?
No.
Yes? No?
Yes,
Why yes?
because they use for the poor people.
So it's used for poor people. No, because
Non-Zakah people might be able to use it as well.
non-zakat people will be able to use it. But the key thing is what Maulana mentioned. Who's the owner of that well? Nobody. Yeah? So the tamliq has not been done. The tamliq has not been done, and therefore you can't use it for people to benefit from it without making them the owner. You can build a well and make one person the owner of the well. That's different to making a well for people to access and benefit from. Similarly, the question then will come, and again on their leaflets they set up Islamic libraries and all those kind of other provision that they do. According to us, from a Hanafi point of view, that the tamliq and ownership needs to be made, and making these provision where people can benefit from without getting the ownership, then zakat cannot be used over there. And Maulana mentioned yesterday about a personal borrowing that you have, or personal lending. Do you count that as a debt or not? So Maulana mentioned about borrowing money from Hafiz Ifzur Rahman Sahib, who has a lot of money to lend. Yeah. So he lent £5,000 to Maulana Habibullah. Yeah. So whether to pay zakat on that or not. And like Maulana mentioned, ihtiyat is, right, that whatever you've got to give back in 1 year, you deduct that. Yeah, there is an alternative view that the whole amount is counted as a debt. So if it's a private loan, the whole amount can be counted as a whole debt. Ihtiyat is because you are taking your zakat out. If it's a long-term debt, then to just offset the amount that you are due to pay back in that particular year. The reason for that is, although Hafiz Ifzur Rahman gave that £5,000 over a period of 2 years, and he said pay £2,000 this year and £3,000 the following year, he is within his entitlement to ask for that money back sooner. He is within his entitlement to ask for that money sooner. So there is a possibility that you count the whole amount as a debt and offset that against zakat. Yeah, ihtiyat is that you know that the likelihood of him asking for that money back sooner is negligible, and therefore you only offset what is going to be due on you in that course of the year. So there's some point of clarity.
Qarza Hasana given to madrasa or something is the same.
Yeah. Qarza Hasana given to a madrasa or any other organization would be the same, that you will, when you're calculating your zakat, you will include that money in, because you're hopeful, inshallah, that you will receive your Qarza Hasana back. Yeah. The common joke is that Qarza Hasana sometimes becomes bad debt, and that's why the reason for calling it Qarza Hasana is Qarz Deke Hasana. Yeah, the other person laughs away. That's one of the lame jokes that are generally used. Anyway, on pensions and other stuff, the key principle, rather than going into different pension schemes, the key principle you need to remember over here is, if you are in a pension scheme and you are able to influence where that money is being invested. So you don't have access to, the common question is employer contribution, employee contribution, you can't access that pension fund until you're 67 or 55, whatever that might be. So I don't have access to that money. If you are able to influence where that money is going to be invested, yeah, and that will be for, you know, I want my pension pot to be invested in this share, in these shares, or this kind of, you know, business transaction. So wherever you have a say, then you pay zakat on the whole pension pot, whether that is employee contribution or employer contribution. It doesn't matter. If you do not have a say of where, if your pension scheme is such that you don't have a say in where that money is then going to be invested, then on your employer and employee contribution, you don't pay zakat. Does that make sense? So where you have some kind of say, not full control, where you have some kind of say about where that money is going to be invested, then on the whole pot you will pay zakat. And where you don't have a say, although it is your deferred salary, because the employee contribution is a deferred salary, you don't pay zakat on the whole amount. That takes me over to the CTF, Child Trust Fund. Do you pay zakat on that amount or not? And in there, because you have a say in where that will be invested, you can move that child trust fund around. As soon as the child becomes baligh or baligha, and they are already eligible to pay zakat, yeah, they have met the threshold. So then they will pay zakat on that child trust fund. If they're not eligible to pay zakat, then when they become mature, baligh or baligha, from that point onwards, you will give them 1 year. As Hawlan al-Hawl is done, 1 year has surpassed, then at the point, at the end of that 1 year, they will pay zakat on that child trust fund. If your child is now 17 and looking forward to access that at 18 and became baligh at the age of 14, and to this date haven't paid zakat, you will have to pay for the years that you haven't paid zakat on it. Are we clear with that? Okay. Any questions? Okay, I'll take that one first.
About pension, some pension scheme, when you become 55 or 60, you can take a lump sum. What happens if you don't take a lump sum?
That's fine, you don't pay zakat on it.
You don't pay zakat.
The same principle of the money in the pension pot. So if you haven't withdrawn it from your pension pot, that money will remain in the pension pot, and the ruling whether you have a say or not, that will matter.
So if someone's accumulated quite a bit of pension over the years,
You promised to share something with me last year. It's been 1 year, you still haven't shared it. So really, I should have been taking. Munaf is a pension advisor, and we had this discussion about a year ago, and he was supposed to share information with me, and he hasn't. So really, I should have been answering this question.
well, my quick question is, so if someone's got a pension pot worth quite a bit, I'm talking whatever, but if they haven't got that sort of money to pay the zakat on, that's due, then what happens then?
Okay.
Because a lot of people will be in that situation.
Yeah. So in those kind of circumstances, sometimes the money is tied up, and the zakat becomes, you become liable to pay that amount of zakat. So let's take it into a more practical terms first. A woman who has jewelry, yeah, and zakat becomes forced on her, but she doesn't have liquid cash. Would she have to pay zakat? So what will she do then? Sell her gold, yeah, and pay zakat. Yeah. If she doesn't want to sell her gold because, you know, she wouldn't dare to do so, or she couldn't, yeah, or sometimes people don't want to just part from it. So then that zakat will become a liability on her, and she will have to pay the zakat later on when she gets cash. Same thing will go there. There was a question yesterday asked by Inayat about sometimes people make false claims or fraudulent claims. Yeah, whether that is claims to somebody else or that is a fraudulent claim to benefits. Yeah. So in there, Maulana had already covered in his presentation any of that money which is not halal for you to take, then you don't take zakat out on there. Whole of that money becomes wajibut tasadduq. You've got to give whole of that money in sadaqah. And the key thing over here is whenever you have haram money, I had a person that came and asked me once that, do you know where Candy Corner is? Used to be a different sweet shop. And it goes that over the years we used to just help ourselves from that shop. Yeah? Now later on in life I've realized what I've done. And even as Baligh we used to do that. Yeah? So all that money I owe to that person or to that shop. Now, what do we do? So when you realize your mistake and you've got to return that money, then that money should be returned to that person. Yeah, the shop owner or to the shop. That money should be returned back to them. If the previous owner, was it actually shop or somebody? Yeah, going back many, many decades ago. Yeah, used to be a sweet shop. So he said, we used to take it from that shop. Now we don't know where they are and the family's moved on and the shop's closed. Over there, when you cannot return it back to the original owner, then you you take that money and give it to the poor and needy. Yeah? Okay. Any other question?
So what inheritance tax? Get money from inheritance to pay zakat on it?
Inheritance tax itself?
As in inheritance, someone that your parents give you inheritance money.
Okay, so the money that you're going to get from inheritance, is that what you're asking for? So somebody's passed away. And the family have not distributed the wealth yet. And you are eligible for a share from it. Is that the question? So you are eligible for a share from it. Your zakat date was 1st of Ramadan and the person passed away in January. Yeah? So now the zakat really you are entitled to whatever share from that inheritance. Do you pay zakat on that or not? You haven't got it in hand. Okay? So because you haven't got that money in hand as yet, is according to the Hanafi position, you have a strong debt and a weak debt. This is something that money that is coming in to you, right? Money that is owed to you, but not in return of any commodity. Yeah, it is coming to you because you are eligible for a share in their inheritance. So until you don't receive that money, you don't pay zakat on it, and you don't not have to backdate that to your zakat date. So now if you got that in July and your zakat date was 1st of Ramadan, then you don't have to go back and take zakat out retrospectively. Similarly, for dowry that was supposed to be given, so somebody's nikah taken place in March, and they said that we will pay Mahr Fatimi or something like that, just say for matter of ease, that was £1,000, that we will give this dowry later on and haven't been given. You don't calculate that £1,000 in your assets and take zakat out. Does that make sense? We've got 3 minutes.
Yeah, when you give zakat, you've got to make an ownership of the person. What happens to all the collections that take place from Darul Ulooms and all that? What's the masla regarding that? Because we don't know what happens to that money.
Yeah. So Maulana mentioned in his presentation about either you separating that money for zakat, and then the one other element to that is you make somebody a wakil. They become your representative. Yeah? So once you've given your money to that representative, you are absolved of your responsibility. The person who becomes your wakil, now he is responsible of your zakat. So sometimes madrasa or somebody will come to collect zakat. They've collected zakat of 10 people, they've gone away. They now become responsible for that money and over a period of time that they will spend. The only thing that we've got to consider over here is that the representative, what if he was to lose your zakat, or you gave him your zakat and he was on his way back home, and on the way that money got stolen. What happens? Who's liable for zakat now? So he picks the phone up to you. Ma Habibullah, you gave me your zakat. The money's been stolen, or I've lost it. So who pays zakat now? Is it Maulana who did the chanda, or is it Ma Habibullah?
Should be Maulana who did chanda, because he's the one responsible. Person that's responsible.
So the Maulana that did chanda. So he will have to take out 10 people's zakat. Yeah. So in that, Maulana Habibullah will still remain responsible for his zakat,
Even though he's paid.
although he took his money out. Yeah. So if the money is lost, obviously in that calculation he will offset the money that he gave in zakat and pay zakat on the remainder. Yeah. So the person, the wakil, that is acting on his behalf, but the liabilities will remain with the muwakkil, the person making the wakil. Yeah. That's why if you are unsure about how that money is being used, then it's not the wakil's responsibility, it's the muwakkil's responsibility to take the authority away from that person and give it in the right course.
I don't know if we've already covered, but imagine you're going to make a large purchase and then your zakat date comes along. You're going to purchase a house, you save some money up. Do you still give zakat on that?
Yeah, that was one of the questions we were going to cover and forgot to put it down on the list. But you're committed to buying. You're committed to buying a house. So then it would depend on what stage you are in your agreement. If an agreement has been struck, ijab and qabul has been done, whether that is done directly or through your solicitors, yeah, and it becomes binding, the contract becomes binding, then even when the money has not been transferred, yeah, you don't pay zakat on it. Yeah, so it all depends on where you are on your commitment. You are going for Hajj, you've already purchased the package, whether you paid the money or not, whether you've only just paid the deposit and you've got the remainder of the money with you, but you have purchased the package, it was £10,000, I was going to say £5,000, but you know, the cost of Hajj ever increasing, it's £10,000, you've given £3,000, all of that, £10,000 that you have in total will be offsetted, will be deducted and zakat not liable on it.
Shares, if you're not intentional of selling it, you still have to pay zakat on it.
The simple answer is yes. Yeah, the value of the share, you just pay zakat on it. There is some kind of further detailed explanation about, if you really wanted to go into the nitty-gritty of things, that what portion of that share is on machinery and all the other stuff, and what is on the zakatable asset. If you are able to do that, fine. But you pay zakat on the whole amount of the value of the share and also the dividends that you will receive. Last question, and we'll
You also mentioned something about deferred yesterday. I think I understand what you meant by that. That 12-month deferred thing.
For the loan, is it for the loan?
Yes, will you then spend some money and if you don't want to return, or we're going to get it back in a certain time?
Yes, so what I just recently just mentioned about if you've borrowed money of somebody, yeah, and then you've got to pay that back over 2 years or 3 years, then do you offset it now or not? What Maulana mentioned under the mortgage scheme, that you've got a mortgage, you've got to pay, you know, the mortgage is for £50,000, but in a year you're only paying back £4,000. Only that £4,000 minus the interest will become your liability, and you will offset that. Yeah, it would differ in when you're talking about your private loans.
I believe Imtiaz has got a question.
Okay.
Go on. I can't remember the question. Come on.
Okay, if there's maybe like,
Just the last one. You know when I said normally people pay zakat in Ramzan? That's funny because every year our Islamic calendar standard is early. So how are you going to be paying on, say, January, February then?
yeah, and that's why it is important that you calculate your zakat. Maulana mentioned that on the first presentation, that you calculate it on the lunar year and not the solar year. If you went according to the solar year, every 36 years, you will pay 1 year of zakat less. Yeah? So that's why we say, if you don't have a fixed date and you don't know when you become Sahib Nisab, you fix it, draw a line in the sand, which may be first of Ramadan, and go with that. Okay? Any private questions? Your Mulsabs are around over here or in any of your local masjid. Please go with them, take advantage of them, right? And have that discussion. Try and understand your own personal situation and understand the zakat. And then, like Maulana mentioned yesterday, it's about taking a bit more than what you have to take out. It's better to take the precautionary steps so that you are not paying less zakat. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you an eye to understanding. Subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanakallah wa bihamdi, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta.